Good evening. I'm Eric Swalwel. I'm the newest Democratic candidate for president in 2020. I know many of you are thinking, Swalwel, there's so many candidates. What makes you so special? Well, I'm kind of a deep thinker. I spend most of my days at my brother's farm watching his bananas ripen. Have you ever watched a banana ripen? It starts out green, very green, but then the sun cascades over the giant heaving mountains and kisses the banana. Slowly it turns yellow, then it's ripe. I am the banana, America, and you are me. Together we are the banana. Americans are bananas. Let me ripen you. I will be your sun, and I will cascade over your giant heaving mountains and kiss your banana. Where do I stand on the issues? How about guns? I say confiscate them all. We can't have any more senseless deaths. And if these gun nuts won't give up their guns, I'll nuke them. I won't allow another gun death. Abortion? A fetus has no right to be inside a woman's body. I'll give every fetus 10 days to peacefully leave the mother's body, and if they refuse, I'll nuke every uterus in America. What about transgender rights? If I am you and you are me, then everyone is Eric Swalwel, and we are all one. Capiche? Climate change is the greatest challenge facing our species. According to zero scientists, if we don't do something about it in 12 years, we'll all be dead. So if I'm president, I will personally nuke every cow who passes gas under my watch. We will eliminate cars, and in their place, every citizen will own a unicorn. Unicorns can fly, so we won't need planes either. It was Abraham Lincoln who said, 4 unicorns and 7 metros ago, our foreskins nuked a great nation. I'm Eric Swalwel, and I endorse half of this message. The other half will be nuked. Thank you, America, and be bold and vote for me and you in 2020. This message was paid for by Maxine Waters Pediatrician. Douglas Murray wrote a fascinating book recently called The Strange Death of Europe, and part of his thesis throughout the book was that Europe had completely rejected its founding beliefs and cultural identity, and this in turn, this rejection of what made Britain British, this rejection of that identity, of their cultural foundation, which was Christianity. It was Judeo-Christian beliefs merged with the Enlightenment later on, but it was this rejection of those beliefs that left them wide open to competing ideas and cultures, which in turn would erode the very foundations of their society. And so his book was largely about those competing ideas, which is Islam. For Europe, it's Islam that has invaded into Europe and into the UK specifically through Germany and France and other countries. But these ideologies, these religions that are directly opposed to what Western society typically stands for. And now that Western society has rejected its underlying values and its cultural heritage and religious identity, because it has done that, it has left it wide open to erosion, and it's basically facing its own suicide by bringing and importing in millions of people who live and reason and think entirely different than you do, than British people, British citizens do, in importing so many of them into their country at a time when they have rejected their foundations and their values and their true identity. It's a form of cultural suicide. So I think that's very pertinent idea for where we are today here in America as well. We are in the process of doing the very same thing that Europe has done over the past 10, 15, 20 years. We're just following along a little bit at a distance, but it is strangely unsettling to see that we can look across the pond and watch what is happening to Europe as we speak. Right now, they're crumbling before our very eyes, and yet we do not see that we're in a way following right behind them and doing the very same things. We're in the process right now in America of rejecting all of the values that made America great. As the famous saying goes, America is great because it is good. If it ceases to be good, it will cease to be great as well. And we are ceasing to be good. We are rejecting wholesale the Judeo-Christian values that have made America what America is. Despite what many atheists, prominent atheists like Christopher Hitchens and some of the others, will tell you, America was founded as a Christian country. These people, Richard Dawkins, consistently tries to peddle the idea that they were secularists. They were not in any way, shape, or form. They were Christian men of one denomination and affiliation or another. But these men were all theists who understood and valued the morality and of the Bible and knew the wisdom of the Bible and used that in the foundation, in the founding of America and in setting up our government. And you're seeing that idea, that foundation being totally eroded today in the West in general. And I think anybody who has any time on their hands should read Douglas Murray's book, The Strange Death of Europe. It applies today in America just as much as it does for Europe. It really does. Over there, they have Islam really chopping away at the foundations of their country. Over here, now we have socialism. And both of them are wreaking havoc across the West. Just one from one end and the other from the other. That's all. It's just different sides. It's just the opposite side of the same coin, really, when it comes down to it. But both of them are diametrically opposed to Western values and Western cultures. There is nothing compatible with Islam in its true, pure doctrinal form and Western values and Christianity. There's just not. They're directly opposed to each other. The same could be said for socialism, and yet we are starting to embrace it here in this country. It's appalling, some of the things that we hear these Democrat candidates speaking of today, all of them in a mad rush to outshock the other one, to prove that they are the true leading progressive, as they each take individual viewpoints that are more extreme than the other. Kamala Harris talking about more and more attacks upon the Second Amendment. Bernie Sanders claiming that even the Boston Marathon bomber should have the right to vote from his prison cell, that rapists and murderers should have the right to vote from their prison cell. How do we allow these kinds of ideas to germinate in our country to where they reach a point to where presidential candidates are spewing them forth? How do we get to that point? It didn't happen overnight, I can tell you that. It was a progressive, slow degradation of American values, but we produced it. We're reaping the whirlwind, as the saying goes. Bernie Sanders didn't come from nowhere. He came from America. He came from American schools. He came from American education, American society. This is the best we got right here, and we're seeing it paraded in front of our eyes. Their ideas are what you would call quote unquote American ideas today. They are not American in the true sense of the word, but they came from American schools. This is the product of America's education system, which has been totally taken over by leftist ideology. I hate using that term leftist, but there's no other word for it. Progressive ideology, if you will, which is totally opposed to America, views American history as genocidal, as totally just this perverted idea of colonialism and genocide and rape of the land and murder. And their view of American history is a very negative one. Look at the comments of Illhan Omar. This is a lady who is sitting in Congress as we speak, who has power. She is on committees that have a great deal of power. She's investigating things. She's not without influence. And the things that are coming out of this woman's mouth, just like Bernie Sanders, I wonder, how did we get to the point? I know how we got to the point, but it's still stunning that we are at a point where people actually defend the comments of Illhan Omar. And I'm all for free speech. I fully stand for the free speech of Bernie Sanders to say what he will. Any of them, Illhan Omar, all the same. They should not be legally restrained from speaking as they wish, by no means. But at the same time, the culture should totally revolt against what they are saying. My way of viewing things is that legally there should be no restraint, as I said, on speech. But the culture, it should be as if you had just ingested poison. You should vomit it up and want nothing more to do with it. She should be rode out of office at the next election. Not a single person, if this was truly a good nation, would vote for Illhan Omar or AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the hope of all hopes, Plato and Aristotle with boobs and an estrogen overload, the woman with a head as empty as the Rock of Gibraltar. I mean, she's a freaking moron, and Illhan and Illhan Omar have kind of worked as a tag team now, to just see who can say the more outrageous thing and get away with it. And clearly Nancy Pelosi, who's supposedly the head of the Democrat Party, who ironically and sadly today is looked at as a sort of moderate, even though she's the farthest thing from a moderate. But she is compared to these new socialists in the party. Nancy Pelosi is totally unable to restrain these people. Supposedly the leader of the Democrat Party, and she has no control whatsoever over a party. And we heard about this. Members of the Democrat Socialists, these groups, have gone on the news before in interviews. I wish I remember the gentleman's exact name, but I heard an interview not too long ago where a member of these, he's a Democrat socialist, openly admitted that they were using the Democrat Party as a sort of parasitic host, as a springboard for their ideas, to make socialism more palatable to the people. Marry it with the Democrat Party, and you can get your ideas out there much quicker, much more fluently, and you'll have the media backing you as well, and really as a megaphone. And that's what you're seeing wholesale right now. You're seeing it come true. These people were not lying. They were bold about what their intentions are. They were not trying to hide in the dark. They're bold out in the open with what they're trying to accomplish. They're telling us what they're doing, invading the Democrat Party, who offer no resistance whatsoever, to be perfectly honest. But it seemed to have embraced their socialist brethren, as one departed brother to another who is finally returning home. They seem to be long-lost cousins finally meeting again after years apart. There was no tears as the socialists moved in and took over the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party seems to have agreed, for the most part, that this is the way forward, progressivism, and it is a poison to the country. And you can see that just how the same ideas are going on over in Europe as well, along with Islam. There's this strange merger between Islam and socialism. The UK is becoming increasingly socialistic. The West is falling. This is undeniable. To punctuate that, like an exclamation point, a bolt of lightning down on us, was Holy Week. Supposedly a time for reflection on the sacrifice of Christ and his resurrection, was instead turned to absolute horror when Notre Dame Cathedral burned to the ground. But more disturbing than that, beyond some of the other aspects of the story, such as the fact that we were told that there's no way this is arson before the fire had even died out, put that to one side. But what was even more disturbing was how many people not only mocked the burning of Notre Dame Cathedral, but were actually totally apathetic to it as well. Just kind of a meh and a shrug, and just moved on with their day. No knowledge whatsoever of what Notre Dame Cathedral actually means, not only to Christianity, something that's been totally rejected across Western culture now, and it is a big part of the explanation for why people are just apathetic towards the burning of the cathedral, but also our education system has totally failed us in that people don't even know the historical importance of the cathedral either. Yes, on the very first day of Holy Week, that burned down, totally destroyed. And I couldn't help but feel as it burned that this was some kind of poignant divine symbol of what is happening to the West now, as Christianity fades like a star out into the abyss of the universe and blinks out, forever to be gone in the West. And the West cheers, as not realizing that they're being plunged into darkness. And then, of course, on Easter, in Sri Lanka, we had the bombings, 3 church bombings, 2 at Catholic churches and 1 at a Protestant church a couple hours later, I believe. 2 of them were simultaneous. It was obviously connected. The terrorist group has been identified that pulled these off, but 300 people massacred in Sri Lanka. All for naming the name of Christ, of course, by an Islamist terrorist organization. There were also 3 hotels which were bombed as well. The investigation is obviously ongoing, but what I find very ironic and disturbing at the same time is that if you rewind the clock back maybe a month and a half ago, to whatever point it was at, the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand, the media was extremely bold and vocal about the fact that this was a white, possibly Donald Trump and Candace Owens supporting an influenced white man, right-winger, who had shot up all these Muslims, these innocent Islamist worshippers at these mosques in New Zealand. And by all means, I condemn the shooting of anybody for no reason at all, unless you're in a war, of course. But to go into any place of worship, I don't care what faith it is, whether I believe in it or not, and to shoot the people is absolutely atrocious. And you should spend the rest of your life in prison, if not have the death penalty brought down upon your head. But I find it just very disturbing that the media, and very telling that the media was extremely vocal about the details of that story, how this was a right-winger, a white man, and a Donald Trump sympathizer who shot Muslims in New Zealand. Jump ahead now to Sri Lanka, where Islamist terrorists have bombed Christian churches and killed Christians, Catholic and Protestant, in the country of Sri Lanka. And the media response has been to totally downplay and ignore the fact that these were Christians that were being slaughtered by Muslims. Barack Obama and HRC, Hillary Rodham Clinton, who I now call not Chelsea Clinton, both put out tweets saying that it was sad that Easter worshippers were killed, again refusing to acknowledge that they were Christians. And the reason for this, as other right-wing pundits, and I agree with them, have speculated and stated that it does not match up with the narrative that is being put out there. And the narrative that is put out there is that Christianity, that there is a broad idea now in the West of Christian privilege, and that is merged with white people, white privilege, and the patriarchy. These things are merged together. Christianity, white, cisgender, heterosexual males, these things are merged together into this idea of just, they formed it into an image of a person that is the ultimate oppressor and cannot be a victim. To acknowledge then that Christianity can be that Christians can be victims would be to deny their narrative. And they can't do that. They just simply cannot acknowledge that, because their entire narrative is built off of the fact that Christians are the ultimate oppressors. They're the colonialists, the heterosexuals, the cisgender white males, the patriarchy, all these things all tied together. And so it would absolutely destroy their narrative, and they refuse to acknowledge that Islam, who is one of the oppressed, could possibly be the oppressor and make Christians the true victims. Never mind, the fact that actually, according to worldwide statistics that are undeniable and irrefutable, Christianity is the most persecuted religion and faith in the entire world. Right now, there are approximately 240 million Christians who are living in conditions of persecution around the world. In France, leading up to the burning of the Notre Dame Cathedral, accident or no, there were 875 churches just in 2019 that were attacked or burned or desecrated or whatever, looted, pillaged, vandalized, what have you. 875. This is not a small thing. And now we have the bombings in Sri Lanka. This is not a small thing. This is not a one-off. This is not just a fluke. This is targeted harassment of people of the Christian faith. And you're going to see, even though Sri Lanka is in Asia, Notre Dame is in France, you're going to see more of this in the West as this pervasive idea of Christianity as being the downfall of Western civilization, as we withdraw, as the education system poisons people's minds and doesn't tell them the truth of how Western civilization was founded. You're going to see more of this as people like the totally atrocious and execrable Mike Cernovich put out tweets like saying that Christianity is the ultimate downfall of the West, and what we need is a dose of moderate Islam. When we have people like that, we can expect more incidents like Notre Dame and Sri Lanka. These things are going to happen on a continual basis. These are not flukes. This is intentional, targeted persecution, and it's going to continue. So I think the best thing for anybody of the Christian faith would be to realize and accept that this is not something that is going to pass over, no pun intended, to the faith. This is no Passover. This is not going to just there is not any moving on from here. These incidences are here to stay as long as we continue to bring in cultures and ideologies and doctrines that are directly opposed to to our founding. Socialism included. Socialism historically has been no friend of any religion, particularly Christianity. You have only to look at the regimes of Joseph Stalin, for example, in his targeted harassment and persecution and murder of Catholic priests. Joseph Stalin, on his deathbed, his last act on this earth was to raise his fist to curse the heavens one more time, and then he fell back on his bed and died. So you could say his driving motivation was a hatred for God. And I think that's a powerful antidote, really. It was told by his daughter, Stalin's daughter, who witnessed his final moments, raising his fist to the heavens one more time. and she wondered what could possibly have stoked the fires of so much hatred within her father. 15 million of his own people murdered by his hand. This driving hatred of humanity and God, which one follows the other inevitably, because man is made in the image of God. So if you hate God, you're going to inevitably hate man. But I didn't mean to leave you all with just such a dark kind of episode, I guess. But there's no denying that the events that have been happening lately are rather dark. Sri Lanka, and Notre Dame particularly, and very ominous for the West, I think. But I'll be back next week with another episode, hopefully a little more upbeat. I think it'll be more on the presidential candidates, the Democrat presidential candidates, in a little more detail. I want to talk about Bernie Sanders and what this man actually believes. A man who is twice over a millionaire and can't seem to get over millionaires and billionaires. All right, well, that's the episode. Good night, and God be with you.